Thank you for watching Skyrise Media Society. My name is Sherry Solsani. We are here at the City of Coquitlam with Matt Djonlic, and he's a councillor of City of Coquitlam and Municipality.
Thanks for coming out here today, Sherry. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having us. Well, our conversation today is based on what's going on in the city, and we're going to head to the affordable housing and the vision for the city, what's going to happen in the future.
Well, and there's so much happening in the city right now, from housing to rec centers to parks to all of the infrastructure that's going on beneath our feet when you drive throughout the city. But I want to say thank you for coming out here today. I know in today's media landscape, more and more we're seeing local papers that are unfortunately closing, and so to have this kind of local media coverage to get the word out on what cities are doing is something that's so important for municipalities like Coquitlam.
Well, thank you. That's our job. Matt, please share a bit about yourself, your background, and what has inspired you to become a councillor?
Yeah, so I've spent most of my life in the Tri-Cities. Prior to being on council, I was privileged to work in the provincial government, where I worked in the local government files, housing, finance, and mental health. And I think through that developed an appreciation for all the things that local government can do. I was also on our Coquitlam Public Library Board, so did a lot of work with Coquitlam's libraries and some of the planning there involved with getting what will be our third branch with the library opening in a few years. But I soon learned that we pay so much attention to the federal government, so much to the provincial government, and there are very important things that happen there. But it's local government that affects our day-to-day life. Mm-hmm. It's our parks, our rec centers, our police, our fire service, water, sewer. People like being able to wake up and be able to flush the toilet, and that's your local government. And we're seeing the impact of that in Calgary right now, of what happens when local government infrastructure is neglected and all of a sudden the city's in a state of emergency without water. So it really highlights that the work your municipality does, while it might not get the same attention to what the Prime Minister is doing, is critical to your day-to-day life. And that's really what drove my passion. I love the City of Coquitlam. I've lived here most of my life. Like I said, I've spent pretty much my entire life in the Tri-Cities, and I love living here. I'm the youngest member of our council.
I know, I can see.
Yes, and so being able to shape our community and be able to say that this is the community my family is going to stay in, that I could raise kids in, is something so important. I ran because I wanted to make sure that Coquitlam could continue to be a municipality where young families can raise their kids, they can move to, and have a high quality of life.
Mm-hmm. Now, for our audiences, they want to know who's Djonlic. Who's Matt Djonlic? Where were you born?
So I did live in Port Coquitlam, previously to Coquitlam, when I was really young. My family then moved across the way to Coquitlam when I was in my early teens. And
were you born in Port Coquitlam, or?
Well, I would have been born at Burnaby General, I guess, and then
That's where my daughter actually was born.
I was born there, but yeah, lived in Port Coquitlam before. I graduated from Terry Fox Secondary, as a lot of Coquitlam kids do, and it's I live in the city center neighborhood. I've lived in this part of Coquitlam for the last 7 years or so, and with my partner Natellie, and we live there and hope to raise our kids here. We're like a lot of young couples in a bit of a cramped space because it's what we can afford.
It is
but
very nice.
Hopefully we'll get a little more room one day.
Yeah, it is very nice to see that actually young people like you like to become a councillor, to do something for their city, to and that inspires other young generation, you know what I mean? So, what are the current key initiatives or projects the City of Coquitlam is working on right now?
Well, there's one I want to talk about that's coming up really soon. It's going to be opening this summer, and that is the new outdoor Spaney pool at Mundy Park. And so Coquitlam, unlike a lot of other local governments that have moved to closing all of their outdoor pools, or as we're seeing in Vancouver right now, the Kitsilano pool, which is having to stay closed for the summer because it wasn't kept up, we're actually investing in a brand new outdoor pool that's going to be twice the size of what it was. So that is an imminent project that's going to be opening for.
Where is that going to be?
That's at Mundy Park.
Mundy Park, yeah.
Yeah, so we have an outdoor pool there. The new one is coming. It's going to be really exciting, and I know residents are going to be thrilled to be able to enjoy that when it opens later this summer.
Yeah.
Construction is just almost there, and we're hoping to have an opening date very soon.
And is that for free or?
It's $2. $2, yeah. And we have, and for all of our rec programs, we do have subsidies for low-income people who might not be able to afford being able to use the facilities. One of the things we want to do is that no matter someone's age or income, that everyone is able to enjoy these facilities. So we have that. We also, plans are continuing around our new Burke Mountain Rec Center and Library. Those are opening in a few years. We're also working on a number of other projects like our urban forest management strategy. That's going to be really critical to ensuring that we continue to have tree canopy coverage. And we are working, and we're going to talk about it later, but what of course is the number one priority for, I think, all cities and all orders of government, housing affordability.
Of course, that's the main issue.
That is, I mean, what I hear from residents almost every day is around concerns around affordability, whether it be that they're from young people who can't afford to buy or afford their rent, to seniors who are struggling too. It's not just one demographic that's struggling with housing affordability. It's become across the board. And add in the cost of living issues with price of groceries, gas, and all of a sudden we have not just a housing crisis, but an affordability crisis.
Now, how is the city engaging with residents to gather their input on municipal decision and projects?
It's something that we always do, and we're developing new
like
projects.
A survey or something?
Well, so we do a biannual survey for residents, but one of the key things I think is more important is simply going to residents to consult about what we might be planning.
So you'd like go door to door?
Well, it could be something door to door. I mean, that's something I do as a councillor, and we do to get feedback, but also through our staff, which is really important. So I'll use an example of where we're currently planning a new bike path and streetscape enhancement along Nelson in the Millardville area that will connect Blue Mountain Park to Mackin Park. And what we did is we actually went out into the community at the Millardville Community Center. We had an open house. We had all of the designs, the pictures, and brought in that community feedback. So we could hear from residents, what are your concerns, and then start to be able to maybe perhaps answer some of those, because people, change can always have some concerns, and sometimes it's just a matter of answering those questions, or it's actually getting their feedback and incorporating that into the plan. Because sometimes I find, it's not about what I want or what city staff want. It's also about what residents want for their community. That's first and foremost. So oftentimes it's the residents, the people that live in their neighborhood, that know it best, better than I could know. I live in one part of Coquitlam, and they live there every day, and so they might be able to bring in feedback to shape the projects that we're bringing to their local community.
Now, does the city have, like in the city hall, or I don't know, maybe there's some other places, does the city have, for example, meeting, like a council meetings for residents to join in and to just give them their feedback?
We do our annual town hall. That's an opportunity for residents to come out and be able to ask questions of council and staff. We also, of course, have our regular council meetings every Monday, not quite every Monday night, but most Monday nights. And at the end of every meeting, we do have a question and answer period where residents have that opportunity to come and ask questions of council for items that were on the agenda. Unfortunately, and one of the challenges we're struggling with now is we used to have what was called public hearings, where if a new housing project was coming into a neighborhood, we would have to have a public hearing where residents get to come and ask questions, voice feedback, be able to say, I support this or I'm against it. And with the new provincial housing legislation, that has been severely curtailed. They will still happen for those projects that are quite of substantial changes, but for most of them that were perhaps not as substantially impactful to the community, but still change, we don't get that opportunity now. And that is a change change that the provincial government has put on us, which I think has some unfortunate challenges for us in Coquitlam, where I found, certainly as a councillor, it was valuable when I cast a vote for a project or support something or vote against it. Knowing what the neighborhood's thoughts on it is something that I certainly take into account when I cast a vote.
Yeah, and then also residents can be volunteered to help out, with this kind of...
Well, and speaking of volunteers, that also highlights our advisory committees. Coquitlam has a number of committees that are each chaired by a councillor. I chair our sports and recreation committee, as well as our accessibility committee that focuses on issues of people with disabilities and barriers. And those are made up of volunteers that live in the community or that represent organizations from the community. And they're a very valuable component of how council gets feedback. So we have sports, accessibility, environment, multiculturalism, community safety, and a few more that are made up of community volunteers.
Oh, that's great. What step is the city taking to increase the affordable housing?
Mm-hmm. And this is absolutely the crisis of our time right now, is around affordable housing. Everything else, yes, huge impacts on cost of living, but housing is the number one driver, and it's what has been driving, and we've seen it through the Bank of Canada reports, it's housing costs are driving up inflation. And what we're doing, since I've gone on council, I've been pushing very hard on getting us more subsidized rental units, as well as redefining even how we define subsidized housing. So moving from what was 20% below market rentals to now 25% below market rentals. We've also put forward city land to do some affordable housing projects. So two of them are seniors housing, because that is a demographic we know that are struggling a lot with affordability. So we're going to have a new subsidized seniors housing right next to the new Millardville Community Center and on Sydney near North Road in Austin.
Yeah.
So we'll have another project there. We also just recently joined the province in purchasing a co-op that was so that we can ensure that it's actually kept as affordable housing. This is over on Packer, just off Johnson, so right near Coquitlam Centre Mall, where rather than seeing this co-op sold off to a private developer and then rezoned for unaffordable condos, we've actually joined with the province using our affordable housing reserve, which comes not from taxpayers' monies, but from developer contributions. So when developers actually build housing, we charge a bit of a fee that then goes into our affordable housing reserve, so we can use that money to purchase and protect or to subsidize more affordable housing units.
For young generation that they're actually starting their new life, one-bedroom apartment, for example, it's about 2,200 right here in Coquitlam. Yep. And they're starting their life. They're just maybe their income is about $50K. And with the groceries, with gas and the rent, it is too high. Is there any plan for those people, not just for seniors?
And that is something I know firsthand as someone who fairly recently was able to actually finally get into the market and purchase a home and now has a exorbitant mortgage. I don't know how it will ever pay off. It is something I know near and dear, and I say this to people and it shocks them. I am a city councillor in Coquitlam, and if I had to move, or if we have kids that need to move into a bigger unit, I don't know how I could stay in Coquitlam.
No, exactly. People move to Maple Ridge, Pet Meadows, and even further.
And even further now. And we see it even with staff at City Hall talking to the younger staff who more and more are making up the workforce. They're coming from Chilliwack, they're coming from Abbotsford even, because that is where I'm challenged to call it affordable, but at least relatively more affordable housing is out. And these are quite far. And we see it even in our workforce challenges where, and I hear it from businesses all the time, the number one issue, our workforce is retiring. More and more, almost all of our applicants are now millennials or even Generation Z, and they can't afford to live in Metro Vancouver. This is going to create a real crisis, an economic crisis for us, enable our ability to retain a workforce, because we have a retiring workforce, we're trying to recruit people, and we certainly can't get people to move into Metro Vancouver, not because they don't want to, but because they literally can't afford it. And this is going to create not just an issue for young people, for cities, but for private business as well. Yeah.
Going back to seniors, that you said that there's going to be affordable housing because of their income or not. Is there any waiting list for them, or?
Unfortunately, it is always a challenge. The supply of affordable housing cannot keep up with demand. We had another affordable housing site open several months ago. just over on Ozada off Pipeline. Great project, lots of affordable units. They have a massive waiting list. Because the reality is we cannot build the affordable housing fast enough to meet the demand.
And yet in Lohit Mall, there's actually building like 100 of buildings, and the rent there, like I just called for my daughter, and the rent there was $2,500 for one bedroom.
Yep, and this is the real challenge. I know
Luxury buildings.
The city of Burnaby are building towers that are gigantic on our border, and I know that it's through that they're getting the affordable housing in those towers. We have a similar project where when a tower does go up, that we guarantee a certain amount of them must be rental units and must be subsidized rental units. But it is that challenge where we are a growing. Our city is still growing, and it's young people moving out, but it's also a lot of newcomers that come to Metro Vancouver.
Definitely, yes.
And you look at it where, and I know the Premier was just criticizing the Prime Minister on this, and I share that same criticism too, where Metro Vancouver and the City of Toronto are absorbing over half of all newcomers to Canada. And that's great. And I love how diverse Metro Vancouver is. I think it's great. I'm so proud Coquitlam is one of the more, and is one of the more diverse cities in Metro Vancouver. But the challenge is we can't keep up with the population growth. How do we keep up with the schools, the roads, the libraries, the rec centers, the fire halls, police for a growing population? And that is something where we do continue to need that federal support, where, in my opinion, those federal tax dollars should be going to those municipalities, those provinces that are actually having to deal with the substantial population growth.
Yeah, mind you that these newcomers, when they're coming, they're looking for a housing, they're looking for a job, they're looking for schools, and when they come, they have no idea where to start, and if they don't get any supports, then, sometimes they have to.
And I'll say one of the challenges too, I found, and I come from an immigrant family, so I know this well, where home ownership is something that is very important to immigrant families that move here. It is viewed very much, and I know this through my family, where being Canadian, which is something I know a lot of newcomers, is important to newcomers, is owning home and owning property is something that is almost tied up in that identity. It is something about being seen as being Canadian is about having that piece of property, because it is a metric of success, which is, and it should be, and that is the Canadian dream, and it's something my family benefited from and I grew up with, because my family came here and we're able to have all of our family here, and that was one of the key things that I know my grandparents looked at.
Well, we can't forget that, Matt, that BC is one of the expensive provinces throughout Canada.
And the world.
And the world actually is compared with New York,
Yeah.
Now, are there any significant residential or commercial development project in the pipeline that residents should be aware of?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of good ones. We do have one of our first office towers going up in City Centre, and this is something that I've been pushing on and campaigned on to in the election. Was around, we need more office tower space in the city centre. If the community keeps growing with the rate that it's at, it's going to create more traffic. More cars on the road means more traffic. Expanding roads, building more roads is not going to solve our traffic issues. So how do we get more local jobs here? And what I'm hearing from some businesses too is that they want to be out in Coquitlam, because we just discussed this. A lot of the younger workers, they're moving out. Maple Ridge, Chilliwack, Mission, Langley. And Coquitlam is really that first urban touch point north of the Fraser, where you have SkyTrain, where you have high density.
And it's closest to everything.
And it's closest. So there's a real opportunity for us to continue to attract more office towers, which is something I would love to see more of in the city center area and in the Burnaby area, where we have our SkyTrains. In terms of residential developments, I mean, Coquitlam is a pretty big city, so there are always things going on throughout the community. City Center is growing. We're seeing Coquitlam and Oakdale continue to develop ever since SkyTrain came in.
Yes.
SkyTrain was really a game changer for Coquitlam.
It was, especially in Coquitlam,
Yeah, and it is where you're seeing now areas that were once suburban are becoming more urban. I think the other thing to note on development that's important for residents to know is around the recent provincial legislation that now allows for fourplexes to be on every single family lot. This has created a substantial amount of work for Coquitlam. We have some areas that just, frankly, they're older. They don't have the infrastructure able to sustain that. But the province has decided that is what they want to do. I think we could have provided some better consultation there, but that is what they're doing. And so what it does mean is that there's the possibility, and I want to stress the possibility, that some neighborhoods that perhaps haven't seen any development in decades could start to see more fourplexes.
That's nice. Yeah. Now, can you elaborate on any new policies or changes in existing policies aimed to address housing affordability? I know you touched.
Yeah, we've deepened the subsidies for our below market rentals. I think there's a lot more we need to do. To me, this is my number one issue. I've been wanting to focus on council, and I don't know for my colleagues too. It's their number one issue, and all agree that this is the number one crisis that our community and all of the Lower Mainland faces. You know, we are going through some tweaking, I think, of our policies in terms of how we guarantee affordable housing, not just affordable housing in units, but also unit makeup. We know that there is demand for a certain amount of 3-bedroom units, 2-bedroom units. I don't want to just see towers of studios that are costing a huge amount of money, because that doesn't. First of all, they're not livable,
and
they all get bought out. And where does the family live? So I do think if we're densifying with more towers, it's ensuring that there are more of the family units and that we're actually getting more subsidized units in those. Because I know that the developers can make those numbers work. I have had these conversations with them. There is a way to do it where, as long as it's transparent and developers have enough lead-in time to build it into their pro forma, we can get the affordable housing units built.
What major road and buildings improvements are planned currently?
Well, I think the big one on roads that we're continuing to advocate to the federal government on, and CP Rail, is around the grading of the railways. So along Pitt River and going into Coquitlam Regional Park, where the Coquitlam First Nation residents live. Right now, in residents I know that live in Coquitlam that drive down Westwood or trying to get off Pitt River have run into the train blocking them. Changing the grading on that so cars are able to continue without being
like even in Port Coquitlam, the one.
It goes through Port Coquitlam and Coquitlam, so it affects both of us. I know it's something important to both of our communities. That's a big one. Also, getting some more connections on Burke Mountain. You know, as Burke Mountain, one of our newer communities, it's also the youngest community we have in Coquitlam, because it's where a lot of the families are moving.
Like transportation, buses.
Transportation is a big one up there. As Burke Mountain grows, and projections show that Burke Mountain, that neighborhood, is going to be like 40,000 people, bigger than the city of Port Moody. Coquitlam is quite large, and a lot of it is still undeveloped. As that turns into more of a location for families and the new rec center, looking at more bus access. We know it's never going to have anything like SkyTrain, that's done, but the bus access is something that's going to be really important. And to see more rapid bus routes too, along Austin, Como Lake, and Lougheed. TransLink, I know, is continuing to have a number of financial difficulties right now. They have a large structural deficit, but their ridership is now getting back up to where it was pre-COVID. So it continues to be a pressing need for us in Coquitlam, is transportation, because that's also going to help us with traffic. If people use SkyTrain, but for people to use transit, it needs to be there, and readily accessible.
You talked about traffic, transportation. Now, that leads to my next question, is that what is the, what initiatives are in place to make Coquitlam a more environmental friendly for our residents?
So we're currently working on our climate action plan. That's going to be coming out later this year, early next year. And there are some key pieces to that plan. I mentioned earlier our urban forest management strategy. So Coquitlam's tree canopy coverage, it's quite large compared to other municipalities, but that's largely because we are also along the urban containment boundary. We have a lot of greenery to the north, but we're seeing that very slowly, but it is dropping as development happens. So we need to ensure that, again, if we are densifying, the green space, the parks, the trees are in place. So how do we plant more trees along our boulevards? How do we ensure that new projects have actual trees put in place? And also about tying some of this to where we place our infrastructure. I'll use an example where we have Metro Vancouver is building the new water main to Coquitlam Lake, and they had to tear up a bunch of trees to do it. So if we know that there are specific areas where there's a critical amount of infrastructure underneath the roads, maybe we plant the trees further to the east, further to the west, so we're not having to necessarily kill the roots of those trees when we have to go rebuild a new pipe. So where we strategically place our forests, our urban forests, is also going to be of importance.
Yeah. Now, what strategy is the city employing to attract local businesses? I know that local businesses is very important. They're struggling because, there's big marketplaces all over the place in Coquitlam. So is there any strategy for local businesses?
The first thing I hear from local businesses is always around, rent. Rent is so huge that many of them are tenants paying a triple net lease, the property taxes they have to pay. And that is a whole other discussion around perhaps the triple net lease system being problematic. But it's also about actually getting more commercial space. Because right now in Coquitlam, our vacancy rate for commercial units is almost zero. You can't find it unless it's something very old and slated for development. So if we actually have more commercial space, it's going to give entrepreneurs more options to be able to actually move into spaces. We've talked about doing some more, and it's smaller commercial rental units too. Some people that want to open restaurants or small grocery stores maybe don't need the huge amount of space. You see some cities where, and we're seeing a little bit of it here in the city center along the High Street. We just have a new business that actually opened with South American food. They're in a small location, and it's great. Their rent is a lot cheaper. They're able to fill out. They're in a high traffic area. These are success stories, right? But it's also too about, we want to make it easy for people who are opening small businesses. I grew up in a small business family. I know the risks people can take in doing that, and I have the utmost appreciation for people who do start their own business, because I know it is a stressful thing, and it takes you're putting a lot on the line to make your business successful. And frankly, we need small business. They employ people in the city. It generates it's not just about the tax revenue it generates, but also about the livability, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It also creates a more vibrant community. I don't think we want to live in a community where all we have are houses and you have to commute out of Coquitlam to visit specific stores. We want to have those commercial areas where people can open a business, prosper, and add to the community.
Yeah, just have the grocery store right at the corner of the street, right?
Exactly.
Now, Matt, are there any upcoming changes or improvements to public services, such as transportation? I know you mentioned a little bit of a transportation, but healthcare or education? Yeah,
some of these are a lot of these are provincial, where healthcare is purely a provincial matter. We always advocate to the province. Coquitlam needs more hospital space. The Tri-Cities is the size of Burnaby altogether, and all we have is Eagle Ridge. Our frustration also continues to be that getting to Royal Columbia is a real challenge with the Brunette interchange. It is so maddening that we know that there are people who are taking loved ones in need to the hospital who might have urgent needs, and they're getting stuck in traffic.
Not only that, there's a wait time at the emergency.
The wait time. So I know the provinces, that is something that they continue to focus on. I'm sure it's going to be one of the key themes of this provincial election coming up. Also with transportation, like we talked about the buses, SkyTrain, we're always looking for more service. We know that TransLink is looking to invest heavily into buses, because the reality is with buses, it's a lot cheaper to get buses on the road than it is to build new SkyTrain lines. SkyTrain is something that is incredibly expensive to build. Buses, obviously, a lot cheaper. But maybe I can also take a moment just to talk about a bit of our budget, some of the key investments that were made there. One of the things that I heard about going into this year's budget was around community safety. So Coquitlam Council took the steps to invest a lot in that. So we've hired 9 new RCMP officers, 10 new firefighters that will operate medic vehicles. So what we'll have now is almost think of them like mini firefighter trucks that can respond to issues like the overdoses, like where perhaps there's been a fall and they need to get into the unit, where you might not necessarily need the ladder and hose that your typical fire truck needs, but it creates a lot more nimbleness for our firefighters to be able to respond to all sorts of different calls and keep the trucks freed up to respond to the blazes. RCMP officer is another important one. Obviously, we're unfortunately continuing to see gang violence be an issue in all of the Lower Mainland. So we want to ensure that the RCMP have the resources to be able to tackle that. And with that, we started a new gang enforcement task unit. So Coquitlam is putting more into now gang enforcement. And we've hired some more bylaw officers too. We have a lot more community events, a lot more people using our parks. And, with one of the challenges with density being, people, of course, don't have the backyards. So they're out they're out by the river more, they're visiting Mundy Park more. And so how do we ensure that we have bylaw officers in place to ensure that there's no, people aren't causing trouble?
Yeah, exactly. And then there's a safety for our residents. I don't see much homeless people around our city, but I do see that in Maple Ridge or other cities, or even in Vancouver itself. It's so much. But how do we, as a city, prevent homelessness?
Yeah, and it's something we are seeing more of right now. It's a little more hidden in Coquitlam, but the numbers are certainly there. Right now, we have one homeless shelter along Gordon Street behind the Superstore that services the whole of the Tri-Cities, and just to be blunt, they're overwhelmed. We are seeing alarmingly more homeless seniors, more people really struggling. We see it a lot in the city center area because that's where the services are. Homeless people who might spend their day at the library, who are going into the senior center, who are looking for a place to be able to hunker down for a while and to maybe use the bathroom or computers. So it does speak in that need to, we talked earlier about subsidized housing, but for homeless, subsidized housing isn't enough. You're also dealing a lot with people who might have addictions issues, mental health issues. It needs to be that more medically based supportive housing that comes not just with saying, okay, here's your unit, but here are the medical and health supports that come with that. Because you do have a number of, not in all cases, but a number of people who are dealing with some pretty severe issues, mental health addictions. And sometimes too, it might just be life coaching. When I worked in the provincial government housing, I toured a number of supportive housing units. I've met people and talked with people that are unhoused. And one of the issues too is just when you have someone who has been unhoused for 10 years, even if they aren't dealing with the mental health and addictions issues, it still might be about life coaching, helping them get back on their feet, because it's a hard thing to do. It's really hard to go from the streets and then being back to a person in society that's working a 9-to-5 job and paying their rent or mortgage. There are a number of steps in between to get someone from the streets to that.
I know there is some food banks out there in Coquitlam.
Yep, Share continues to do a wonderful job with that. We also have the People's Pantry and the Immigrant Link Society that do a lot of collecting the food that was going to waste. And I've been out with the Immigrant Link group and picking up food, and I marvel at the amount of waste that grocery stores throw out. I would love to see, and have said to provincial politicians, and we'll continue to push for it here, where we put some bylaws in place that say, look, if you are a grocery store, you need to give your waste to these groups. Don't just throw it out, because they are throwing out so much food that is still good.
And they're doing such a good job.
Wonderful
volunteers,
people.
I know.
Huge. All those, everyone who gives so much, Immigrant Link, People's Pantry, Share, they do such wonders for the community.
Yeah. Now, my last question. What is the long-term vision for the city, Matt? And how does the council plan to balance growth with maintaining the quality of life for our residents?
And that is the big challenge, right? Of how do we balance these two? Because we are in a world where the province has said, here's your housing quota that you have to build. If you don't build it, you're going to be in trouble. So we know we have to develop. We don't have that choice anymore. But I asked that question. I know all of my colleagues asked the question of livability matters too. You can't just put people in a home and not give them the parks, the libraries, the infrastructure, the emergency services that are required with a population growth. So It is that challenge of making sure that Coquitlam is, and we've done a good job at this, I believe, in ensuring the city is in good financial health, and we're planning ahead with our capital projects. So rather than waiting for a crisis to hit and saying, oh my gosh, we need to build a new park or rec center, we're very proactive with that. And it's where the community planning piece is so critical for cities to do. Victoria and Ottawa, they can't plan our cities for us. They're too far away.
Yes, that's
so
right.
when we're able to say, look, we know when this area is going to develop, we're going to need a park here. So let's start ensuring that park is being planned and that the right property is being, we're saying to developers, if you're going to buy these lots, you have to contribute this piece of the land for the park. Or that we're planning ahead for a new library like we are, because our two libraries are bursting at the seams. Or we're planning for the new rec center up at Burke Mountain. These are projects that take years often to plan and to finance. You can't just wait till the night before we need them and then expect that they're going to go up. So because Coquitlam is a community where we have very healthy reserves in Coquitlam, I think this is a city, and kudos to our staff for it, who plan ahead and do great work to ensure that those pieces are in place when we are developing. That it's not just about the housing. Housing is number one, absolutely. People need a roof over their head, but we also want to ensure that all the other pieces come with it.
Exactly. Everything goes together, right?
Yes.
Now, do you have anything else to say that our audiences should know about the city?
I think pay attention to your local governments. Talk to your councillors, talk to your mayor. What the federal government does, like I said when we started, it's important, but the work that your local government does, if it were to disappear, you would notice immediately. It's when you step out your front door, even before then.
Yes.
Turning on your water, your lights, planning for your community, your roads, when you dial 911, all of these things come about from your local government. It's so critical, and it's unfortunate it doesn't get as much attention paid to it. I know it's always fun to bicker about who's going to be the prime minister or this or that, but the reality is, the federal government is a world away.
Who's going to do the job?
Who's going to do the job on the ground, right? So
exactly.
my feedback would be talk to your councillors, know your councillors, know what your city is doing, because it affects you, and you are a taxpayer in your city, and you can have considerable influence over how your city is shaped.
And I think those meetings, the council meetings, that the residents actually, they are welcome to come and share their own opinions and their concerns. It is very important to the residents to know that there is facilities like this that they can actually bring their own opinions and their own concerns and share with the councils.
Absolutely.
Well, there's going to be questions for sure from our viewers. Thank you, Matt, for this interview, and thank you for watching. Please email us at theskyrisemediasociety@gmail.com. See you next time.